the word of the year in 2022 was ussy, this
Hmm.
suffix libfix, which annoys me to no end as a living, breathing human woman in this world who considers herself a feminist, because people are obsessed with
Hmm.
the fact that this ussy, this like comes from pussy, subtext libfix is the word of the year, and no one else previously or afterwards cares about the word of the year. No one is like, oh, initiatification is the word of the year. Ben Zimmer, please explain this to us, and I'm gonna laugh and like be in the corner like laughing my eyes off because it's like, why do you
Right.
care so much that OC was word of the year, right? And I think that I've also been a little bit upset in the way that it's been defined as like, oh, you can just take it and add it to something else to like make draw attention to like if something has a hole. Well, it's not just a hole. Like we're
Hmm.
not just taking throat and ussy and making thrissy and talking about like no one's referring to their throat as thrissy in all contexts. That's
True.
only being referred to as thrissy in contexts that are sexual. No one's like,
Hmm.
oh my God, I have a cold this week, my thrissy hurts. Like that's not something that you could say felicitously. You could make a joke about blowjobs and say something about thrusty. So I don't know. This
Yeah.
you really got a lot of airtime out of Ussy, which like good
Well,
for you, great.
not in
Yeah,
not on CNN, that's for sure, or in the New
sure,
York
yeah,
Times. The I It's funny because this most recent year when we picked enshittification, there was a New York Times reporter on the scene who ended up writing a very nice kind of recap of the whole thing. Did a great job with it. Her name is Sam Corbin. And I have to give major props to Sam because she managed to convince her editors to actually have enshittification unexpurgated in the
yeah,
pages of the New York Times, and that's good to see. It tells us something about sort of the changing nature of some of these taboos. The year before that, as you say, it was Ussi, which I learned from Sam was something that the Times had been considering covering, but they kind of shied away from it. They're like,
right.
we're
How
going to give
dare
this a
we? How
pass.
dare we speak about that? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right. That was seen as off limits. That was seen as too taboo uh, for the New York Times, or I should say, the Wall Street Journal, where I write. I wasn't about to write a column about it without recognizing I would get sort of major pushback from my editors. I mean, these are the kind of strictures that we work with in major media publications. But so with Ussi, it was interesting because uh, we chose Ussi. I tweeted it out as I do every year on the American Dialect Society Twitter. It was still Twitter at the time, Twitter account,
Yeah.
linking to the press release, totally mild-mannered thing, and that went more viral than anything that I will ever be involved in. And in part, sort of thinking back on that more than a year later, um, why was there so much interest? Why was it this thing that just like zillions of people were sort of sharing and laughing about? Uh, in part, I think it was the fact that there is this group of language scholars, called the American Dialect Society. And of course, they don't know, also it was the Linguistic Society of America, the larger group meeting in conjunction with its sister society, the American Dialect Society. But these serious linguists and language scholars who had decided that Ussi would be the word of the year was this kind of comical mismatch of a sort. It was sort of the incongruity of it, I think, is what made it humorous. That this term again, which when it's sort of getting used online, and less so these days than it was a year or two ago, but
Yeah.
but it is, as you say, very often, the sexual connotations, the taboo nature of it that that has to do with women's bodies, but in this particular way that
Hypersexualized, I would say.
yeah, there's a sexualization that goes on, but where the idea that you can sort of sexualize anything
Yes.
that you are sort of morphologically attaching the ussy libfix, as
Right.
to use Arnold Zwicky's term, to whatever you want to, and thereby sexualizing it in this particular way.
Right.
Um, that phenomenon on its own was funny enough to people. Again, you could sort of like, why is it funny? But then the idea that it has this somehow official recognition as word of the year made it seem for a lot of people who were already familiar with the term thought that it was, hilarious that this outrageous bit of the language was getting some sort of like being anointed in this official way by a group of serious language scholars. That was the sense that I got. And then, even though the New York Times wouldn't write about it, Rolling Stone and other outlets did, ones that, where you could actually get away with talking about these things. And I saw it as an opportunity to sort of again talk about how these things do become so prominent that a group of language scholars would call it their word of the year. Um, and also to talk about our whole process and how we do it. So Kelly Elizabeth Wright, who is has taken on an important role in these word of the year selection processes now. We call her our data czar because she takes in the nominations from the public and then sort of presents them when we have our nominating session to talk about what is sort of interesting people at large and like the way that the folks who are voting can understand it. She had been sort of tracking the use of ussy and seeing that people nominating it and that sort of thing. And she had created for that year a whole video talking about the nominations. This was because she wasn't able to attend that year. The LSA conference was a video that we shared at the nominating session, but
Yeah.
then just had online on YouTube. And so because of the exposure from, the whole to do over ussy, we sort of get this coverage in Rolling Stone, and they, even embed Kelly's video that she did where she's talking about this whole process. So like even though for the most part yeah, the whole thing sort of went viral in this way that kind of faded away very quickly. It didn't necessarily bring in, a huge amount of like people sort of thinking about these things in a serious way.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that that was an opportunity to sort of put this out a little bit more in venues like Rolling Stone that were willing to sort of like see it originally as, oh, this is very funny, but then what the heck is the story behind this? And then sort of to look into this a bit more and report it out. Uh, I appreciated that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I just want to clarify. It's like, it's not that ussy is the word of the year that's so upsetting. It's like the fact that people um either refuse to acknowledge it, didn't want to talk about it because how dare we
Hmm.
speak about women's bodies in that way. But then
Right.
also this idea that like we can, it's just about if something has a hole, a wine bottle, a
Right.
wussy or something. No, that's not what's going on here, right? You're consistently reducing like a woman's body to something that you can fuck. Like that
Mm.
is what is going on here. If the word of the year were phallic, no one would, there would, New York Times would run with, I think they would run with that. That would be so awesome because we have such a veneration of like phallicness in this world, frankly. So like that is why I think it is like at least was upsetting to me. I
Yeah.
was like, really? And then to have people be like, we can't have cunty be a word of the year. Well, like, why
Mm.
not? That actually is something that people are using to be empowered, to speak
Hmm.
about something as it's cunty, as in it's like powerful and it's loud and it's out there and it's
Yeah.
unapologetic. And so yeah, that's my little
Well,
yeah.
again, I I just as a dude, I'm not going to sort of weigh in any sort of mansplaining way on these issues, and I again try to avoid that as much as possible. Even though again I'm called upon to explain things, in the case of like OC for Word of the Year.